Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well and staying safe. Today, we're going to be talking about the waitForEnabled command in WebdriverIO. As the name suggests, the waitForEnabled command waits for an element that you select for the amount of milliseconds to either be enabled or disabled. There are different parameters that you can pass in. So you can pass in timeout in milliseconds. The default is 500 milliseconds, but if you want it to wait longer, then you can increase that time. You can also do reverse, and I'll be showing that example later on. So if you want to wait for it to be disabled, then you would enter the reverse parameter. You can also have timeout messages as well. In the documentation on WebdriverIO, they show an example of how you can use the waitForEnabled command to check for an element to be enabled or disabled. So let's get into the example for today. First thing that we're going to do is create a quick project. So we set up our npm package, and then we are going to install WebdriverIO client interface that is going to allow us to quickly set up WebdriverIO with some demo tests. We run the command npm I at wdio/CLI, and once we do that, we can also see that we have a package JSON, and in this package JSON, we have the project name and WebdriverIO CLI is there as a dependency. As this is a quick project, we aren't going to go through the config one by one. We're going to say npx wdio config -y to select the default installation for WebdriverIO. So we have the local runner, Mocha framework, spec reporter, and we're using Chrome driver service. The default setup comes with some tests, a login test, and we can run that by saying npx wdio run wdio.config file, and this is a login test that is going to go to internet /login, enter Tom Smith and super secret password as the password, and we should get a flash alert to say we have been logged into a secure area. So we're going to create our own test file. We are doing waitForEnabled. So we're going to create a test file for that. The test that we'll be doing today goes to the dynamic controls on the Internet Heroku app. When we click the enable button, the field should get enabled after some time, and we can enter some text in it. When we click disable, the field should get disabled, and the text underneath the button should change from it's enabled to it's disabled respectively. Let's get the locators for the elements that we're going to be interacting with in our test. We right-click, inspect. The enable button can be found by saying input example as an ID, as well as the button that is under the input example. Let us now add our page object file. We're going to call it dynamic control. And we are going to have it extending the parent page, which allows us to use the open that is going to go to the dynamic controls URL for Internet Heroku app. So we had 3 elements that we're using. We're using the enabled button, which is input example button. We're also going to be checking for the input field, and we're also going to be checking for the text that shows up under the disable or enable button. To complete our page object, we are going to add a function to click on the enabled button. So we are going to say await this.enabled button, wait for displayed. Once it's displayed, then we click on the button. Note that we are using async for this project. Now let's get into writing our test. This project is using Mocha, so we require the page object that we just created with all the locators and the function. We have a describe and we have a it, and we have the async keyword so that we can use the await statements. So we're going to say await dynamic page dot open, and this is the function that was extended from the parent page object and will open up Internet Aruco dynamic controls URL for us. So once we do that, we just want to check that our test is set up properly. So we're going to do a browser.pause and we're going to run this test. To run a single test in WebdriverIO, we use the spec keyword. So whatever command you're using to run your test, npm test, or in this case, npxwdio, then -- spec, and the path to the test that you want to run. Right now, we're running the waitForEnabled test. That works, so we can now continue writing our test. We're going to delete browser pause. You don't keep browser pauses in your test, it's not best practice. And then we are going to click on the enabled button. So we're going to say dynamic page dot click enable button. That is a function that we had created in our page object. And then we're going to wait for the field to be enabled. We can also add a timeout. We can add 4,000 milliseconds to say we want you to wait for the element to be enabled for at maximum 4,000 milliseconds. As I said earlier in the video, the default is 500. So if you wanted to wait for a longer time, then you would include a timeout in the parameters. Let's now add some assertions to our test. When it is that we click the enabled button, we are expecting that there is a message that is shown that says I am now enabled. So we can use the expect assertion that comes with WebdriverIO, and we can check to see that the message says it's enabled. We're going to use the to have text containing. You could have used to have text and enter the entire text, but I'm using the to have text containing assertion, and then I just put in enabled. I have a video on WebdriverIO expect. If you want to learn more about the assertion, you can check that out. So if we go ahead and run our test, it should click the enable button, wait for the field to be enabled, and verify that the message that shows up contains the text enable. If we click the button again, then the field should be disabled. So we're going to write a test for that. It's going to be pretty similar to the one that we have here. It's just that we are going to use the reverse parameter to ensure that it is waiting for disabled. So we have the same click enabled button, and then when we say dynamic page dot enabled field dot wait for enabled, we need to enter the reverse parameter so that the command knows that we are checking that it is disabled. So we can still keep the timeout, but we just add in the reverse true parameter. So this is now essentially saying wait for disabled. And we can copy the assertion as well and ensure that we are checking for the disabled text instead of the enabled text. Run our test again. We see where it clicks the button. wait for it to be enabled, click the button again, and then wait for it to be disabled. We can add some additional assertions by entering some text in the field once it's enabled, just to double check that it's actually enabled. So we can say dynamic page dot enabled field dot set value. This is an input field, so we need to set value. And once we do that, we can just pass in something like I am enabled, and then we can verify that it has the value. Notice that we are going to say to have value instead of to have text. Value is for input fields, text are for paragraphs, etc. WebdriverIO expect assertion has to be disabled and to be enabled asserts that you can use to check that the field is disabled and enabled. These are just additional assertions that you can use when you are waiting for enabled or waiting for disabled. Run the test again. We see that it clicks the button, wait for it to be enabled, enter the text, verify that the text is correct, click the disable button, and wait for the field to be disabled. So that is it. That is how you can use the wait for enabled command, and you can use it to also wait for disabled. I also noticed that I did not change the second it should be wait for the field to be disabled. While I was writing the test, I still had just copied and pasted it, and it said wait for the field to be enabled. So you can just go ahead and change that and everything should be good. But yeah, hopefully this helps you, and you can go on and look out for more tutorials on the different commands that WebdriverIO has. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. See you in the next one.